Welcome back to Chapter 6. Now we are going to do some color shining, some stenciling, and then adding texture paste right on top of what we stencil. Just a little bit off to give it this really cool textured effect that mimics what we've just stenciled. So we're going to actually flip over what you've just used, and if you're concerned about messing up what you've done on the front, now that we're going to work on the back, lay down a paper towel, and that will collect any seepage that might happen now that we're going to actually spray with our color shine. So I am going to grab another paper towel to have on hand that will blot up my excess of the color shine. So what I'm going to do is actually kind of do a combination of blush and tea. When you're using the color shine, you really want to make sure that it's nice and mixed up, so that you can't see the iridescence on the bottom of the bottle, because you really want that, you know, infused onto your project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do the top third of this is going to be with the blush, and then the bottom 2/3 of it is going to be with the tea color shine. And where they mix, it will kind of create a cool, beautiful color, and then we'll be stenciling on top of that. So let's just get started with the color shine. I always like to make sure that my color shine is spraying nicely before I go at it on my project. So just kind of test it, make sure. And I'm just going to spray, I think that's probably enough, the top third of my project. And now I'm going to follow up with the bottom with the tea color. And I'm just going to let it overlap. The tea is going to overlap the pink just a little bit. And I'm going to allow it to kind of soak into the chipboard before I blot it off. Then I kind of just like to do kind of a dab blot, because what that's going to do is make sure that the iridescent doesn't get picked up. Like if you're wiping it off, some of that beautiful shine color will be lost. So then I'm going to go ahead and dry it. All right. Now, because the top of this is now lighter than the bottom, it's going to be a perfect place for me to add some stenciling. So I really just want the stencil to kind of fade. I only want it to be kind of in this top area. So I'm actually going to go through and I'm going to spray with the tea. It's going to mostly go over the blush, and I want this to be very, very light. The trick with color shine and stencils is just a very, very light dusting. So I like to tell people to imagine kind of like a soft snowfall on top of their stencils rather than like a major rainstorm, because if you do too much, it gets underneath the stencil and it no longer really looks like the stencil. It looks like stencil seepage, which isn't everybody's favorite. So what I'm going to make sure is that as I spray, I'm spraying over the screen and that it's falling onto the stencil. And that way I won't get a huge amount of seepage. So I want to make sure that I'm nice and shook up. And it is a quick motion, and so I like to tell people your hand is what's going to move the color shine. So I'm actually going to press down on the nozzle from the left side, and as I pull my hand to the right, the color shine will then fall as I move. So it happens really fast. So I don't know, maybe we can like do a super slow motion version of this. I've always mimicked the slow motion version, but I've never actually had a slow motion version. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray here and pull my hand across. All right. So again, it was a super fast, right? But you'll notice that when I lift, you get this very light touch and really pretty effect with the stencil. And I'm going to dab up that part that was a little bit thicker. So very nice, light, subtle, and perfect stenciling. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's dry. Okay, Now, to add just a little bit of extra accent, I want to add some of this metallic texture paste to emphasize some of the stencil. But I want it to be just slightly off the stencil so that it just kind of gives it a little bit of a shadow. So you kind of have to look at all of the pieces of it. Like I said, I'm just kind of lining it up with the stencil and then just moving it over just a little bit. So I'm just going to double check it. Okay, so I'm all lined up on the stencil, and now I'm actually going to kind of pull it diagonally down. All right. I'm not going to cover up the entire stencil. I'm just going to do some highlights. So once again, I'll put just a little bit, a dollop of the texture paste down on my mat, grab my scraper, pick up about half of it. You want to kind of secure your stencil in place. And I'm actually going to drop down with the texture paste even lower than where the stencil shows up. I like to kind of scrape off as much as I can with the stencil itself. All right, and then we lift. And now look at that. We have such a really cool textured tone-on-tone effect that mimics the stencil, slightly off it, but the colors look really cool. All right. Now that it's dry, I can go in with my ink yet again and just kind of distress those edges a little bit. Add a little bit of stamping. All right, perfect. All right, with that doubled up stenciling technique, that's the end of chapter 6.